For the camera here, for the people in the audience, Burad, Brad Anderson, DSource, Brad Roberts, Brad DR, BRADDR, yep. Amazon, okay? Okay?
I can't do DSource stuff.
Okay.
I can't do this kind of stuff.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about DSource, and I'm going to hand it over to Gregor a little later to talk about DSSS. But first of all, I wanted to say, just like Walter did at the beginning, thank you to Amazon.com for hosting us and to Brad for putting it together. Strong showing. So thank you. So from what I've seen today, this is going to be pretty fluffy compared to some of those. Hopefully, I'm going to talk about hopefully everyone's favorite open source site for D. I may be one of the only ones confused enough to talk about a couple of Python apps at a D conference. Although I have heard that Kirk's speech tomorrow is going to be along those lines too. So here's my contact info. And I know I just harped on it here, but feel free to reach out to me if you guys have ideas that'll further the site in any way. And feel free to interrupt with questions anytime during the speech. So, okay, what are we going to talk about? A little bit about our history, purpose of the site, a little bit about our past. As far as the lies, yeah, I've been doing some work on statistics, and I'm going to try to use those to show growth, within projects and whatnot, and try to get a mechanism to have us get some of the top projects to percolate up, and some of the ones that haven't been touched in a while to kind of fall down a few pages, so they're not the first thing that new visitors to D see. A lot of abandoned projects. So, also going to talk about some of the current goodies in the app. Make sure you guys, as existing users, know about some things that I may not have communicated so well, some convenience things and whatnot. Also have a little bit about a new generation, a third generation of the architecture that I've been working on to sidestep some problems that cause, some of the bounces that we've had to do recently on the server and threads thrashing and whatnot. And then I want to talk about the future. Get some feedback from you guys, talk about some of the things that I have planned that I know that the existing DSource team wants to do, and then see what you guys have to say. And then obviously, there's that project name again, D3S? Okay. So how many people here have not been to or ever visited DSource? No worries? Yeah, right. Okay, very cool. We're an open source community for D. I don't know if you can see D-Man or his arms or legs, but he is up there. A little quick background about me and maybe why this site exists. I'm kind of the pointy-haired boss, the suit that is trying to come backwards and learn a lot about programming. And when I found D on, I think, the /dot outing of you, Walter, I started taking a look around. I got into the news groups and found a bunch of really smart people that were willing to be patient with me as I learned. So to give back, put the site together. It is all about project hosting and storage. I guess that picture is storage, and I know you're now wondering about the beer. We offer Subversion for the source code control. Yes, we have a lot of D code, but I know there's Java, there's C++, there's Python. There are probably many others that we house, but it is mostly a D site. We have Track, and Track was the addition to the site that I really enjoyed. The beautiful front end that it puts on Subversion, the source code browsing, the timeline, the roadmaps. It has a built-in wiki. I'd always talked about getting Bugzilla integrated, and I just didn't have to because of the ticket system in Track. So we are making progress, and it seems like everything's going well. There have been a couple bumps. We did start the site with PHP BB as far as forums and discussion, but I'll make my disdain on that known a little bit in the coming slides here. So we're open to just about any project. We can do closed source too, although since we've moved to a hosting environment, I may want to charge you a bit. But anything open source, anything D, more than welcome at our site, so don't hesitate. So to the beer, we want the site to be free. I also abhor ads. I don't want ads on the site, so I'm looking for a bit of support from you guys, so everybody tunes out the ads anyway, right? So our main goal is to further de-standing among programming languages by providing infrastructure and encouraging you guys to use best practices by providing these tools. So that's it. Now, way back in the beginning, okay, so it might not have quite looked like this, but it has, feels like we have been around for quite a while. I am now picking on Chris. He had one of the first projects on DSource. So thank you very much for putting up with all of our bumps and, as we move from paper to digital and then from whatever else. So I think you'll, just like DSource has made a lot of progress, I think you guys will recognize that Chris over time has made a lot of progress in his project naming skills. So here we have Mango, Tango, all on the same label. Very nice. So, all right. Okay, so we went live in 2004. Actually, the next couple days would make it like exactly 3.5 years, so that's pretty cool. We announced March 2004 to the news group. They're the first 5 projects. DWT was me stupidly porting by hand SWT. And then somebody else picked that up. Mango, obviously, still running very strong. There's an Eclipse plugin, DigDug, and I think some Mac GUI bindings. Is that what that is? Doko? Somebody, well, right. And also a couple of early thank yous. Justin, who put the tutorials together. John Reamer was the forum police before we had some captures in place. We had some nasty things happening in the forums as everybody fights on their blog comments and whatnot. He was fairly diligent there. And then my company, Mirus, they were donating bandwidth and rack space, so that was a pretty big thing for them. If you guys want to show your appreciation for Mirus and you happen to be the CEO of a restaurant company, go ahead and give us a call and maybe become a customer. That's fine. So, okay, so what's going on now? We have 3.5 years that we've been operating, 143 total projects, 60 of which are active, 30 of which are very active, and yes, if I gave you the numbers, you guys could pick this apart. These were kind of lines I drew in the sand. And they'll probably evolve and get more strict definitions around them. We have about 1,000 registered users, and I'll talk a little bit later about why I think that number is low and why I think it may go up in the future. And I was surprised. There are a lot of tutorials that Justin has been doing, at least doing the organizing on, but 560 is a really nice start there. And also recently we've moved to a hosting solution where Mirus is off the hook for the bandwidth. We were kind of, at certain times when Europe woke up, we were kind of drawing a little bit more, and we had an our data center in our office was doing a transfer, and that was bogging it down, and we kind of tracked it down to DSource, and I was sort of asked to look around for some other options. So, but 3 years was pretty good. So the current team at DSource is not this big. We are up to 6 people, though, so I can find a little bandwidth and get more of the things done that we want to get done. 6 people. You've heard about Justin. Mina, I think her nickname is Maid on IRC, has helped out quite a bit. She actually found a bug in Python 2.4, their regex C code, that one of our threads in Apache gets kind of caught up in, and it just dies. And I think everybody here is familiar with that. DSource needs a little kick every once in a while. So she helped me identify that, and she's put together a bunch more installs on packages. I think she's going to be able to help out a little bit more once she ships libd. And so we're going to look for some help from her then. Lars, also on the team now. Spot restarts every once in a while, and then also he has the status of Uber donor. So thank you. Kirk McDonald over here is doing work on pigments. He wrote a D lexer for the pigments syntax highlighting, and so you kind of wonder like why a D site didn't have D highlighting until recently. I think it was torpor, but now that Kirk is here, we're good to go in that department. And my man here, Gregor, is going to talk about the package system that we're going to integrate tightly, DSource and DSSS. Okay, so I tried to get a feel for our slice in the universe, how big it is, and I knew we were going to be at Amazon, so I thought, okay, well, let's try to use the Alexa service, that measures traffic and whatnot. So I went ahead and I got the most favorable Alexa graph that I could. And maybe there's like an algorithm problem there, but right. So actually, I pulled some information from our logs, and I think what you see here is some organic growth between October '05, and the end of last year. A couple of blips when some projects came out, but basically nothing really. We got up to maybe 500,000 page views a month until you shipped 1.0 of the compiler. We got a lot of hits from that in the tutorial section of the site. So it was one of the ones where, at the top there, you kind of see it. And, that was also the slash dotting too. So interestingly, at the same time, downloads grew, but for a different reason. Rules Player, I think is Bobef? I don't know. His project had hit a board where a lot of people were downloading it. It's a front end for MPlayer. It's a GUI front end for MPlayer. So he was getting some traffic there, and that grew in January. In February, Poseidon, the IDE, added to that total. You can kind of see the downloads tapering off here. If I can, kind of maybe coming back to earth. People were somehow less excited than the first release there. But you can then see there's no fall off here. The tutorials hits went way down, but our friends at Tango started releasing monthly and more than made up for the downfall there. So we are, we're approaching maybe 1.75 million hits in a month, and I'm pretty sure since the time I started talking, Amazon.com has already had that many. It's just crazy. So I do have a lot of these statistics. We can, if anybody wants to corner me with a laptop later, we can start looking at them. I can pull numbers for your specific projects. But for all of 2007, you see Tango leading the way, Rules Player and Ant's project up there. I do have all of this data by month, by project, for page views and downloads. So that's the granularity if you guys want to take a look. Again, I mentioned, but I want to use this as a part of the system to weed out the projects that aren't getting a lot of love right now and just make sure that the ones that are more active are percolating to the top of searches and so on. So that is that. Descent, I think, has a lot of August activity, and the numbers, I think I ran them on the 15th, we're going to dwarf, in that last graph there, we're going to dwarf July. So we have a lot more traffic now than we have had. So some of the current goodies that we have on the site that you might not know about, and also a little bit about best practices for somebody who, there are a lot of people who don't want to go read that Subversion book. I like to set up the repositories everybody gets from their project, branches, tags, and trunk, just like the Subversion repository. Or the book says. We also have downloads, and I took this from the track site. They have Sandbox. In trunk, let's say you're a compiler writer and you're working on 2.0, that's where you would put your code, right in the trunk. If you have releases, same compiler writer might have a release 1.019, 1.020. They would put those in tags so that you have a snapshot of the code as it stood then. And then branches, if you have, for two reasons really. If you have a continuing development of a fork, like a 1.0 stable, you just kind of keep going on and doing that. The other you see Sandbox up here on the track site. You can also just use branches for like some crazy development stuff that breaks trunk. You always kind of want to keep trunk compiling, at least it's recommended. And then you can have a macros branch until you're done cooking it all the way. You can have it in a branch. So, the download section, and let me just skip ahead here. You can see the stable versions that they've had and some of the crazy development ones there. I do want to point out, I visit a lot of sites, and I don't see the leveraging of the download wiki macro. Basically, because we have that area in the repository for downloads, you can basically, can you guys make this out? It's basically wiki syntax down here of download : and then the name of a file, and then this is what's going to appear, and then this is actually what you get. So it just saves you a lot of typing. You don't have to supply the URL down here. It will just show up like that, and it will be directly tied to your repository. Cool. Okay. The same thing goes for all the project information that we've captured. You have a project name, a status, short description, long description, so on and so forth. You can basically use the project info wiki macro with name, cat, status, homepage, so on and so forth. And you get a nice little printout, or just simply down here if you just want the short description. So as we add more things like your activity status or some sort of index on how busy you are, and you want to put that in a wiki page, feel free to use macros that I'm going to be extending the project info macro. Okay, on to the new generation that I've been working on. We've talked about some of the thrashing that happens in the threads. I have a new version of the site that's almost ready. It's on my laptop if anybody wants to see it. I have some screenshots here. Almost got it on the server before the show, but it didn't quite work out. So central login, logout, and registration has kind of been just an eyesore. We really don't have it in a logical place. And I think that's one of the reasons for the low user count that we've had. The project list, I think everybody can agree, we need a little work there. It was even a lot nicer before, but links right to forums, links or information about what your Subversion repository to pull from should all be there, and I had it planned, but I do have a new architecture that's going to make that a lot easier. Project voting was talked about in the forums. I think Walter even had some good thoughts about that. All in the works. I'd like to have people vote on projects. Because if you think about some of the activity stats that we might have, is it a good metric to measure how many check-ins you've had? No, if you have a really stable product and you're not really doing a lot to it. So yeah, page views, downloads, commits, but also voting by the public and get some sort of dig Reddit-like thing working where the ones that percolate up to the top can do so. So also at the same time, Eric Anderton, Pragma, as you might know him, is working on Track Forums, which is a plugin that gets us everything that PHPBB used to, still does, but used to do for us, and more, right? So what we do is we walk into syntax highlighting from Kirk's Pigments. We walk into references to tickets, to change sets and all that. So it's a lot nicer. It's a lot more consistent. You can even use this as a wiki page. On the wiki page, you can put the forums there and have discussion on the topic of the wiki page. It's almost like a blog post, and then the comments can be like a thread of conversation below, a little bit like php.net, if you guys are familiar with that. So Track Forums is fairly versatile, and as a true developer would, he threw himself into refactoring and made an ORM himself and did all these other things. And so his official ETA was, quote, when it's ready, on his blog. And he said that was soon, so hurry up. Okay, so the current architecture that we have right now, and yes, we're still floating, you can see the web requests that come in for a project go down through Track and use some of the plugins here. This is like the other site, the project list, the help screens and whatnot. And then you have this weird, disjointed, like, okay, come over to the forums area to register and use PHP BB to do that. So it's a little bit disjointed. Good and bad and everything, right? So the good that we have is an integrated set of credentials. Everybody is using the same one set for your project, your Subversion repository, and the forums. The bad is that we have the 3 authentication methods that kind of grew. As we grew, it got a little bit disjointed. And the ugly is the just not so obvious register. So what really happened here? I don't know if anybody can see that. I love that picture. So again, this is the thrashing of the threads that we really can't get to the bottom of, and this is the not so obvious register. The new architecture hopefully is a whole lot simpler. One authentication subsystem. And you guys familiar with Django? Django? Okay. We like Django. We I think would be using D if we had a nice framework, or and I think we may get there, but how would we do that, Kirk? I'll have to wait until tomorrow, but yes. So, personally for me, there's just no PHP BB. I've been through that code to make sure that everything works, and it's not pleasant. The track plugins, when they're working within one project, do not seem to give any problem or hit that regex bug that we've had. And then I get to play here with everything else, like project lists and whatnot, and doing the stats all through Django, which is a very nice, rich area to play in. So hopefully we get to, simpler is better here on this, and much fewer sites. So here's a little peek. I took some of Pragma's shiny, well, I guess it's Trevor's shiny graphic design, and you can see the beginnings of the consistent. This is on every page. Even down here, you can see that we were in a track project. You have the login and register all here. Simplified a little bit up here. There's no forums. The forums are all within their own projects, and you can have multiple ones. In fact, if anybody wants to take a look at what forums will be, they can go ahead and take a look at the Tango project and see all of the forums that are listed there, and that is where we're going. So, okay, these guys, I know I did some thank yous earlier, but these guys are really at the top of my list. And how many people are in the room here? I know you two. Mark Wren make it? No? Okay. You guys see me later I'll buy the beers. So it takes about $1,000 a year to run DSource on the hosting side. And again, I think we probably have to do some splitting of database and app and some other things, because as everybody in this room expects, we're going to explode and see the hockey stick of growth for D very soon. So I do want to be ready. Again, I've mentioned it. We have a strong aversion to ads, so I just don't want them on the site. And you guys are I'm more than happy to have you guys donate to the site, and we will take it from there. We don't really have any profits or anything like that. So I want to talk about the future a little bit, very briefly, about what we have planned, and then offline maybe you can corner me and we can talk about some of your ideas. But I want to get updated to track 0.11. It doesn't buy us much other than just kind of keeping pace. You get a little bit of configurable workflow if you want to have tickets where, I guess it goes new, assigned, closed, reopened, verified, resolved, whatever it is. You can kind of tweak that a little bit yourself now and get the right workflow that works for the team you've built or your own individual project. Auto assigned to Sean. Duly noted. Okay. Pigments is listed as the syntax highlighter, but they backported that to 0.10, so we already have that on the site. And then, anybody familiar with SVN, blame? I like to call it praise. I like to put a positive spin on things so you can kind of see what blockhead was responsible for this line of code. That's all going to be showing up, I think, as an option in the code browser. So, okay. The project stats, we've talked about that. I just want to find the more active projects. I may want to have the ability for you guys to slice and dice your own data, get some graphs about, Mango and all the other projects out there specifically by month, and you can show your friends and post them to your blogs and so on. I know this one will make Juan down in Argentina very happy, but I'd like to get some mailing lists, so that the people who prefer to do things via email and have their own spam blockers can do that. Mailman has a very nice plugin for Track as well, which is one of the things I look for definitely for integration to the site. OpenID, this was actually a lot bigger on my list before Gregor and I decided to kind of tightly couple everything. The idea was that I have 1,000 users of D-land, and if anybody wanted to put another site up that had authentication needs, they could just use ours, and again, not proliferate usernames and passwords in the D world. So I am still open to that. It seems, though, that we're going to solve that by just having Gregor's stuff kind of ride on the same server. So if anybody else has a need. Hardware and hosting I talked about as well. We may want to split the database side out from the app side if we are inundated with all the masses coming from C++ because they just can't deal anymore, right? Okay. So other source code. This is actually one of the first lol penguins, I think. So a lot of guys on IRC have been saying, let's get a distributed source code manager in there, right? So yeah, thumbs up here. Anybody else like that? Okay, so there's like 1 billion of them, and I don't necessarily want to support all of them. So the one I've heard that has a lot of momentum now, it has a lot of speed on a bunch of different functions, updates, merges, and so on. And just like the thing says, he's right a lot. I mean, it's crazy. So I'm going to go with him. The one thing that was really holding me back was Windows support, and this will be posted somewhere on the DSource site. But a week or so ago, Git for Windows had a big announcement on Reddit. I don't know if you guys saw that. So that was a hurdle that I was like kind of, I was going to alienate those. Obviously, we're not going to get rid of Subversion. I think that was somebody freaked out on IRC about that. And I was like, no, just relax. But Git is probably going to be the one that we're going to go with. And, that's just me being a BDFL on this site. So, okay, so the rest of the future is a large enough topic that I think we can hand it over to the well-dressed one of us, and he can kind of take it from there. Yeah, question, sure.
For people that do like game projects where the activity will obviously drop when the game is finished, how do you plan to do that for the site? Because it seems to be driven by projects that are always being developed. Do you consider projects that actually have a start and an end and then aren't subjected to maybe failing stats?
Well, I mean, that's what I was talking about. I think we're going to have some sort of index across all of the possible stats and kind of weight them maybe the same. But so if you really fall down on check-ins or code commits because you're done, that's only going to be a small portion of it. And again, this isn't going to be the be-all, end-all. I mean, if you search for game, I'm going to hope that yours comes up on the first page anyway because it's a game. We're not that huge yet. But so what's the rest of your question? I mean, you're done shipping, like you're going to box it up and ship it, or is it still going to be downloaded from the site?
No, it's just the site seems to be geared towards projects that are in continual. Some games just aren't that way. They're kind of like start and finish. So I was just curious. I could provide
Hosting after the fact?
a category specifically for those kind of projects that actually, and it doesn't have to be just games. Perhaps it's anything that actually has a start and finish.
Well, I mean, this is certainly a white, empty piece of paper. I mean, I haven't really done much yet. But one of the things that explains why the site is the way it is right now is that I don't want to take any project down. Yeah, okay, so Arcane Jill worked on the big int stuff like 2 years ago, but somebody might find it valuable, and if they can get past her license, cool, they can use it. I don't want to take anything that looks really dead down and off the site. I don't want it maybe to come up to the top of the project pages on a search, but if you're really looking for it and you want to find it, you're going to be able to, and you're still going to take the site or get the code out of the site. Sir? Yeah.
The only real way to do it is to have a drop-down list where the user can pick what he wants to sort by. He can sort by votes, he can sort by number of check-ins, he can sort by most recent check-in, he can sort by number of downloads, and let the user pick what he wants, what's important to him.
And I'd really like to customize that. And that's part of the richness that the Django environment gives me, right? So I'm going to be able to save Walter's preferences on his project page at DSource. He likes to sort by XXX, and he's also just earmarked these projects, Tango and Mango, as his favorites up at the top, and they're always there. So something like that.
Maybe you could start a page for all the projects that haven't done stats. First person to reach that page, you buy them here.
So, but I'll need to increase donations then. But yes, we can do that. Well, the danger is when we get together, right? So now I'm exposed. I'm here. Sir.
In any case, it's a development or a site for developing projects, so the commit stacks or activity stacks will be important.
Ask again.
The activity stats of the project, the development of the project, is probably the most important for most people going there because they are developing projects.
Okay, so I don't follow. You're talking about like the default, the stats. I am open to suggestions here. Let's try to work something out as far as a default, and I think Walter's right. You can definitely make the change and flip it around to your liking. I think so because just like the Tango design, right? You guys have things for the developers that are down at the bottom. You might have stats for the developers, and I think this is what you're saying, stats for the developers that matter a lot. Check-ins by a person, or it's definitely all flexible and not set in stone yet. Anything else?
One last question. It was mentioned to me earlier, so I'm going to relay it here. How about downloading documentation?
I hope you cover this because I have been looking for a way to package up documentation. We have, Tango in many ways is my guinea pig. I try some stuff out on them. We have their API documentation being generated by the site every 6 hours. So they also have a lot of pages, wiki pages of documentation and content, and maybe not so much the forum, but maybe the wiki pages that are like design documentation, and then the API docs. The question was, we're looking for a way to maybe package those up in a download, or at least get access to an archive of those put together on the server side. And I hope Gregor addresses that, because I've punted on it because I knew this was coming. Shirking as much as I can.
I'm Gregor Richards. I'm the author of DSSS. That's the D Shared Software System. You can call it DSSS or D3S. After my talk, we're going to have sort of a contest and see who can say DSSS the fastest, because it is, a bit difficult, but say la vie. And you may be wondering, to a certain degree, how Brad's talk and mine are all related. But fundamentally, both DSource and DSSS are tools for developers that sit above the compiler. Now, DSource is more of the human-oriented thing, whereas DSSS is obviously a build system. But both of them are meant to give conveniences to the developer beyond what they're going to get out of just the basic system. What I really want to talk about, and what's going to take the first big part of my presentation before I talk about DSource integration, is sort of the theory that I designed DSSS under. And I think that a lot of people are reluctant to use it because either they think there was no theory to design it, or or that it's not particularly useful. And the thing is that every language has a build system, and every language needs a good build system, but most languages don't have a good build system. Most languages have a build system that was sort of built ad hoc because nobody wanted to think about it. Before I actually start, let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm a college student. I guess I switched over to D about a year ago, and so I've been on the scene since then. Most of my experience is with C and C++ on POSIX, and so I've built a whole lot of software, both personally and professionally. Since I'm a free and open source software guy, I build a lot of software. And the fact is that with most languages, building software is not consistent. It's not easy. It's complicated. And so first I'm going to talk about building C and C++ software on POSIX systems. The process is different, obviously, on Windows. It isn't really any better. The point of this section is just to show that it's sort of ad hoc everywhere. So obviously, we have this wonderful tool, make. Make is powerful, and make is powerful because it doesn't do anything. Make is powerful because all it really does is assign some dependencies and then say, okay, you can run commands. That gives it a lot of power, but it makes it almost completely unportable. And I'm sure everybody's seen, projects with makefile.linux, makefile.windows, makefile.x11, makefile.this, and that's because there's really no configuration handled, and it's just not particularly portable. And so eventually that was considered insufficient for just those reasons, and people started making configuration scripts that would configure their builds for the particular platform. And the configure scripts were nice because they could sort of read information about the platform and get everything ready for that platform. But they were usually written in Bash or Perl, and so it was really complicated. And eventually somebody said, well, we don't need to write this in Bash or Perl. We can sort of write our own language that will generate those configure scripts. So we have autoconf. And autoconf is nice, too. Autoconf sort of provides it's a bunch of macros in the M4 language, and it generates a shell script called configure. And so long as you stay up to date with autoconf, which nobody does, it works on pretty much every platform. Oh, well, yeah, okay. Every platform and sort of kind of on Windows, but not really. It works on Windows if you have MSys or Cygwin, but that's pretty limited. Anyway, I'm talking mainly about POSIX here. Part of the point is that it's not really that portable. Anyway, in this design, you'll notice that the make files are still written by hand, and that's sort of a pain. They get a bunch of information from configure, but they're actually written by hand, and so somebody wrote a tool to basically generate those make files from templates. So automake and autoconf sort of stood happily and worked together, and eventually they worked together more and more until they were quite thoroughly intertwined. There were valiant efforts to make the process of building libraries consistent across platforms. That never happened. And although it's usually fairly consistent, it's not enough. And so a tool was made called libtool. Libtool builds libraries in a platform-agnostic way. Basically, libtool provides yet another sort of language all its own. You have to call it in a particular way. And autoconf and automake talk to libtool. Well, libtool handles the actual creation of libraries and linking against libraries, but there's usually a lot more complication to it than just making them and linking to them. You have to have library paths, include paths, or import paths in D, maybe some defines, all sorts of complicated stuff. And so people started generating configuration scripts. Those configuration scripts pretty simply just output, the library paths or whatever else is needed for a particular library. And of course, those configuration scripts would be used by autoconf, sometimes. those configuration scripts, in case you haven't noticed the pattern here, they were written by hand. And so finally somebody said, why the hell are we writing these by hand? And wrote a handy tool called package config. Package config is a really handy tool, but unfortunately not everything uses it yet, and so there's still plenty of configuration scripts lying around. And there you have it, the C build system on POSIX. A thing of beauty, really. It all works together so well because they're all so thoroughly intertwined in disgusting ways. I didn't want to cover all the stuff that X11 does. There's make depend and imake. This is the ideal. Of course, a lot of the complexity of building C software comes from the simple fact that there's really no association between the process of including headers and actually having dependencies on C files or libraries. Of course, pound include lines will get you from a C file to a .h file, but any convention from a .h file to a .c file is just that, a convention. Lorem.h could be referring to lorem.c, that would be nice, but it doesn't have to be. And so we have to list all of the files that our tool depends on, and we have to list all of the libraries that our tool uses. This is the wonderful autoconf syntax. It's really nice. But now let's take a look at D. When I started using D about a year ago, it was still too young to have the menagerie of build tools that are required for C. But because people were just sort of making build tools in an ad hoc way, it was well on its way to having that. But D doesn't have that fundamental difficulty of tracing dependencies that C does. Because in C, all you're doing, I mean, a pound include is basically copying and pasting text. In D, we have imports. And imports have a one-to-one correspondence with files. Because of this arrangement, this one import, just one file, can lead you to a bunch of files. Your program is a tree. Of course, that's not original to D, and using this isn't original to DSSS. Bud uses it. But let's talk about libraries now. A lot of languages, a few build tools, actually do use the imports in a smart way for getting all of your sources, and yet there's still no real association between your source and libraries. If you turn your source into a library file, it still often requires sort of a manual, okay, I want to drag in this library and I want to call this config script. However, D's sort of package and module system makes a sort of sensible way to make libraries. You can basically say some package is a library. This general framework, so long as you make it flexible enough, say, okay, well, I might want liblorem or I might want liblorem.delore, just depending on, what level you want to divide it up as. This general framework makes for nice libraries that basically cover sort of little bits of functionality, which is basically what you want a library to do. And by taking advantage of this, and the imports, and taking advantage of the fact that the package and module system makes for these nice libraries, we can take all of this functionality that we need all of these tools to do in C and basically make them all properties of a single language-intrinsic construct. My good friend, import. That's sort of the ultimate goal of DSSS. And it should be the ultimate goal of any D build system, in case somebody else writes a competing one at some point. I try and encode absolutely everything into the simple act of importing. And so, because all of that is in your code, the configuration files for building libraries and binaries with DSSS are notoriously quite simple. This is simply because in C and other languages, you usually have to put dependencies in at least two places. You're doing a pound include, you're including some library, but your configuration isn't going to see that you are including that in C, and so you have to check the package there. And then somebody changes the C code, and it doesn't need that anymore. But it's still linking it in, and it'll be linking it in for 10 more years before somebody finally realizes that the configuration script is out of date. And that's just because we have to encode this into 2 different places, and that's fairly ridiculous, really. DSSS abstracts the process of linking in anything, be them source files, libraries, shared libraries, into a single language-intrinsic construct. My good friend, import. Because of this, using libraries, using third-party libraries, using open source libraries, using any libraries, or even just using your own code, isn't a process of listing a bunch of files that are included, isn't a process of running a bunch of configuration scripts. It's simple. They're all encoded into import. You can think of it as sort of importing from a pool of software. You don't need a net for tango.tuna. You don't need a spear for derelict.piranha. You just need your fishing pole, your import, to import anything. Library, shared library, source files. It seems like a simple concept. It's all encoded into import. Net installation is, of course, where this presentation mostly intersects with Brad's, because its integration with DSource is all about net features. The future of DSSS is all about integration, synergy, cross-platform, methodical throughput of enterprise-wide zero administration software. You too can install the DSSS buzzword generator simply by typing DSSS net install buzzword generator. Anyway, DSSS's network features are currently sort of strewn about in a couple of places, and they'll all be integrated into DSource as DSource provided services. For those of you who already host at DSource, that means that everything you need to do project management, be it the human side or the simple mundane building software side, is all in one place. And actually, despite the fact that I say I don't have a mock-up there, by now I do have a mock-up. Let's see. Yeah, the mock-up was on my laptop, and that didn't seem to work very well. But basically, if any of you use DSource, recognize this admin screen, you can simply say, these are the net packages that this software project provides. Add them to the DSSS list right through your admin interface that you have on DSource, and there you go. That's all there is to it. Right now, this is handled at dsss.kodu.org, and it's a little bit of an ugly interface. Yes, I want to close it down. And it's a little bit of an ugly interface, but it's going to change to there, and that'll be better. And for those who prefer not to host on DSource, that's always an option. If you want to host on SourceForge or something, at least all of your, well, or host your own. Who cares? At least all of your DSSS-related things will be available through that same interface. There are also some benefits for just command line usage, not just accessing everything through the web. Anybody who's used DSSS, or most people who've used DSSS, are probably fairly familiar. Oh, of course, now I'm not on there. Whoops. Are probably fairly familiar with the beautiful DSSS synchronizing screen. Synchronizing is sort of an obnoxious and slow process, and that's just because it downloads the entire source list and keeps a client-side copy of the source list. I'm going to try to switch that to a more server-oriented layout, so rather than synchronizing every time it runs, it'll just ask for what it needs when it needs it. That'll make things a little bit faster. Of course, if you really want to synchronize, that'll always be an option. I don't want to make that an impossibility. DSSS also has a test suite to see what libraries build on what platforms. This is some example output of the test suite. I've blurred the names to protect the innocent. Basically, it just runs the build on a bunch of different platforms, runs the unit tests, sees what happens. This will also be integrated into DSource. Yeah, this is. I can't design things. Not graphically, that is. It's not one of my abilities. Okay. Hey, it's functional. It shows you what you need anyway. A half pass means it built, but it. It means it built, but some unit test failed, which really should be a half, fail. But anyway, yes, it's quite half-assed actually. Anyway, this, like I said, this will be integrated into DSource, and because it can be integrated into DSource, we could actually add some hooks. Imagine you do an SVN commit, and in a few minutes you get an email that says, "Uh-oh, this SVN commit caused it to stop working on OS X." That would be really handy. Furthermore, whoops. Just cross-platform compilers right now. I'd like to make it work in a better way. The problem with cross-platform compilers, like right now, this test suite, I have the DMD on Windows running through Wine, and so I didn't really do the unit tests properly, and so it'll never show a half pass for that column. So, it compiles, it probably works. I'd like to get that a little bit better, but basically it's using cross compilers right now. It can be adjusted to do something a little bit better.
I'm not sure we're ever going to get like Windows or other Unixes,
Right.
Cloud, but if we ever got other platforms there,
Yeah.
maybe do
Yeah.
Amazon's EC2.
Yeah. GDC makes cross compilers really easy, and so for platforms and that kind of stuff, that's a very good solution, except that you can't run it, so you can't test the unit tests. DSSS can also trivially build your API documentation and make it candy docked. So I have a whole lot of documentation for that. So it can conveniently make a nice candy dock documentation of it. This also could be integrated into DSource so that the documentation for either the latest SVN or the latest release, something like that, could be right in the page, just another link, or of course provided as a download or any number of things depending on, users' needs. And now for something completely different. DSSS's net feature gets a lot of hype, and it's a useful feature. I like it. I wouldn't have written it if I didn't like it, but I like to try and take the hype away from that because I think that a lot of people look at DSSS and go, "Oh, it's a system for installing things over the net. I don't need that." It can do that, but that never really was its primary feature. It's just a handy secondary feature. And a lot of people don't understand the benefits of DSSS just for their own, non-net feature development. And I think that's particularly true because when I wrote rebuild as a replacement for bud, a lot of people went, "Oh boy, a replacement for bud," and started using rebuild and then said, "Oh, there's some other system associated with this." Well, I don't really need that. So first, let me again reiterate. I'm a free and open source software guy, and I come from a POSIX environment, and so both of those mentalities sort of encourage very small modular libraries that all can be made to work together, but aren't big, aren't all integrated. Monolithic libraries are our devil. However, small independent libraries have their own problems. In C and C++, this is really visible, and I've had to deal with this a lot, that their builds are slightly inconsistent, and this one, you have to configure these parameters in the proper way, and this one doesn't have a configure script, and the make file doesn't really work on this platform. And it can get to the degree that using those nice, small, independent modules isn't even worth it because they're just so difficult to build. And so what's really important to me, and what's really my primary mindset in the design of DSSS, is that DSSS builds are 100% consistent. I've had heated debates, probably with some people who are in this room, where you've posted a ticket, a feature request, or maybe just emailed me and wanted some feature that on the surface seems good. It would be a nice feature, but I've said no because I think that it would make building inconsistent. The one thing that I can say about every single DSSS build is that to build them, you type DSSS build. Of course, the reason why these small independent modules in other languages are often so difficult is that the configuration scripts are so complicated, they're almost not worth using. This is an autocomp script. This isn't even a very complicated program. And so to write the configuration to build your program, you have to learn a whole new programming language. Nobody should have to care that much about their build process. It seems ludicrous to me that you would write all this software and then go, oh, wait, I had to spend 2 days writing the build system for this software. The build system should be a footnote at best. And that's why I've really strived to make DSSS.conf files so simple. Not only simple, but difficult to do wrong. The obvious thing is always right. All you have to do is list what your source is, and it'll just work. And so a naive build engineer, somebody who doesn't really want to engineer their build and shouldn't have to, will actually make a build that works properly. That's a rare thing to have. And it helps everyone. DSSS is the D shared software system. And I think that I've sort of gone over why it's called that. I've covered that to a certain degree. It's fundamentally about sharing. I'm, like I already said 2 or 3 times, I'm a free and open source software guy, and so that's very important to me. And so that's really what I've tried to infuse into the design of DSSS. It's designed to make sharing easy because it's all done through one standard interface. It's designed to make sharing transparent because all you have to do is build and the sharing is done for you. It's designed to make sharing automatic because it can handle any sort of dependency without your having to list them. Perl, actually, despite the language itself, has a beautiful example of how build tools can help with this kind of sharing. If any of you have used CPAN, you know that it's not considered a faux pas in Perl to have 20 dependencies because getting the dependencies really isn't difficult. And that's sort of what I've strived to accomplish with DSSS. And I think that to a certain degree I've done better than CPAN, but okay. I might just be advertising at this point. It's a beautiful thing. Now I'm really just advertising. I'm not even pretending not to be. And it's beautiful because it's so simple. It's beautiful because it has its limitations. I get a lot of requests to add scripting support to DSSS, and I acknowledge that the fact that it doesn't have very good scripting support, it just can sort of do command hooks and run other things that way, is a limitation of the system. But I have a great fear, and it comes from seeing all of these other build systems, like the build systems for C. And the thing is that with those build systems, because they are written in a scripting language, because the build script is a script in some language, it's often much easier to just write a shim that just so happens to work and then won't work in a year than it is to actually fix the problem. And so I imagine that if I really made DSSS a powerful build scripting system as opposed to just a build configuration system, that I would start seeing scripts in DSSS.conf files that fix some platform bug, which really ought to be fixed in DSSS to make everything, consistent, or do something that is actually a feature of DSSS, but they didn't want to go read the README, and so they didn't know it was there. And so I have been reluctant, but let me just say that I will add some level of scripting support. That's definitely in the future for DSSS. I just really want to be careful about it because I believe that it could be a really easy way to shoot yourself in the foot. Well, actually, you can do command hooks that are just D program files, and those can go in at any point. And in fact, you can have them return things which are commands for DSSS. So you can set settings from them. You can do a lot of things from them. However, it seems to me like a little bit more overhead than's necessary to write this D script to read some configuration and do something and then send stuff back to DSSS. That being said, one good project that has a really good example of how that's helpful is WXD. WXD in the DSSS build has a script which runs wxconfig, since WX is in C++ and has one of those beautiful configuration scripts, and takes all of that output and puts it into a D interface file such that the build with DSSS doesn't have to deal with that. And so that you do have that kind of power, but I feel that adding some kind of scripting that could be in the DSSS.conf file would be a little bit more intuitive. Does that answer your question? Well, that would be, I think that would be possible, but it could be sort of difficult because basically what that would involve would be creating sort of a header and then putting that into the main and then, Oh boy, I like to hear that. Maybe I don't need a scripting language. Okay, anyway. Yeah, I have considered in that sense too. But anyway, the point being that there will be some way, maybe some new and magical way, of integrating some sort of scripted configuration into this as opposed to simple version checks and that kind of stuff.
So at some point, one of the expected you will be popular enough that people will use it for reasons other than language.
Yeah.
See people using Provide D in other language. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Something else and mixing it.
Yeah.
At that point, you don't just want necessarily these specific builds. What do you do?
Okay, so obviously actually I'll bring up WXD again. I like the WXD project. The methods that DSSS uses to get all of those links, get all of those dependencies, are not something that is difficult to generate otherwise. And so for linking out into C programs, I have sort of envisioned in my head that I'll write sort of a C config script to a D interface file generator that'll do all of those links for you. As per linking the other way, that can definitely be more difficult. That could be automated as well, but I haven't really thought about that very much. If you have suggestions, there is a ticket system integrated into DSource for DSSS. Right. I have a final portion of my presentation, and this portion is basically here because a lot of people seem to think that DSSS is magic, and they don't want to use it because they want to understand what's going on in their build. And I can kind of understand that, but actually DSSS isn't doing anything very complicated. And so I just want to run through a build and show that it's not doing anything very complicated. And in fact, it's really quite simple. So obviously you start it by typing DSSS build. The main module handles parameters, goes to the builds function. I think that's fairly intuitive. Reads the configuration script, sort of separates it out into all the sections, and then the build function itself has 4 steps, only 4. The first step is creating
So is this sensitive to where you run it on your system?
Yes, it needs to be run next to the source.
In exactly one directory or anywhere within the tree?
Well, the DSSS configuration file needs to be at sort of the root of your source. Like if you have a foo package and a bar package, then it needs to be above those, unless you sort of want to you can make sub builds, but basically you would want to run the actual build of the whole thing or of some component from this top directory.
So I can't be in a different directory and say build this directory over here?
Because nobody's requested it. There is a ticket system available on DSource. No, it doesn't look for the top level one, and the reason is that I don't really want to go glumping through the file system looking for some file that you may be lost and think you're in the source directory, but actually you are in some crazy directory and now it's building something you didn't know it was building. And I would just rather keep it a little bit more restricted in that sense. I don't think that requiring that you would either specify the directory explicitly or actually be in it is really that much of a restriction for most people. I mean, where are you doing your development from? Right. But it's going to be sort of, right next to it. My point is that it's not a big process to, yeah. And this again comes into I don't want to make it possible to make DSSS builds inconsistent. And that sort of comes into that whole thing. But like I said, if you have a reasonable request that would be a nice addition, blah, 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 repetition. Now then, continuing with the DSSS build. Like I said, building has 4 steps. The first step is generating import files. That's simple and obvious. The reason it does this is because the import files are what associate your library with an actual library file. It makes a directory, DSSS imports, that carries all the DSS import files in the obvious structure. And to every DSSS import file, it adds a simple pragma that's supported by rebuild, the build tool associated with DSSS. And all this says is when you come across this import file, you want to link against that library. The name here is generated, and it's generated so that there's no clashing. S here means it's a static library. Shared libraries don't have the S. D, because it's in D. G in this case is for GDC. It's D for DMD. And then after that, it's pretty much just the name of the package or module that you are turning into a library. And so the name generation is fairly trivial. It adds this to the end of all the dimport files so it knows what libraries to include in the build when a binary build comes across it. This is also where it handles shared links to shared object files. GDC supports shared object files. It pretty much just has a special version if you want to insist that it's static, otherwise it's going to be shared. The next step is building fake or stub shared object files. That's sort of this obviously won't be done if you're not building any shared object files or shared libraries. But this is important for POSIX just because of complexities in linking shared object files. Basically, when you create a shared library, it needs to know all of the shared libraries it's going to depend upon. But if you have a circular dependency, then linking them against each other is difficult. So it just creates stubs to link against those. This is a pretty common step in any build system on POSIX, actually. Next, it builds libraries and also handles any subdirectories, special sections, any sort of hooks you have to run anything else. But fundamentally, it builds libraries. And this is also very simple. It just calls the build tool rebuild. It uses the -lib switch, which is rebuild's portable way of building a library. And rebuild handles all the complexity of building a library in one platform is different from another. And all of the files it includes is just all the modules in that package, very simple and obvious. And it builds the library. That's fairly trivial, really. And it builds the libraries in the order that they appear in the DSSS configuration file. The last step is building binaries, and it always builds binaries last because they're built against the libraries often. That's really the only reason it needs to do it in that order. Other than that, everything is just in order in the DSSS.conf file, so other than binaries being last, it's just in order. Also, binary is very simple. Rebuild traces all of the dependencies of dzip.d and links them all in. It's very simple, very obvious. It's not a complicated process at all. And that's it. It's done building. Installing is even more simple. It keeps a manifest file that's a list of all of the things it's installed. To install a library, it just copies it in and puts it in the manifest file, copies in all of the D import files, copies them in, puts them in the manifest file, installs the binaries as well. By default, it installs everything to the same prefix as DSSS itself. You can install it to any prefix you choose. Having them all installed to the same prefix is handy because then all you need to do is DSSS build. You don't need to specify all the prefixes where you have things installed. But if you have multiple versions of something installed, they would conflict if they were in the same place. So that's why that's supported. This is the manifest file it creates. It's really just a list of files. That's all there is to it. And so uninstalling is deleting files. That's really all there is. I mean, DSSS is not that complicated. So, yeah?
If you've installed two different applications and there were some common files in their separate manifests, when you uninstall them?
Well, if they're common, they're going to install over each other in the first place. I don't really have a clean way of handling that other than just if you know that they're going to conflict, like if they're two different versions of the same library, you'd obviously want to install them to different places. If they're actually conflicting in terms of like two people are implementing the same package or the same module, then that can definitely be a bit wonky. Suggestions welcome. Yes, a ticket system. So, you see, DSSS isn't magic. It's not even very complicated. It's just about actually doing it. It's just the value of it is merely the fact that it exists. It's not that it does all of this complicated stuff, because nothing it does is that complicated. It's just helpful because it all exists. In the future, it'll be more integrated. Just to summarize, in the future, it'll be more integrated into DSource. All of the server-side stuff will be really nicely handled. And the one point that I really want to get across with this entire presentation is no matter what features I add, no matter what integration there is, at no point will anything become anything less than simple. Always simple. Well, the easiest way, since when it's building binaries, it does trace all of the dependencies, you can just copy it into the import path. That's sort of the classical solution, and it doesn't scale well, but it will work. Furthermore, you can actually build a lot of things that don't have configuration files. It'll sort of figure it out most of the time by just sort of going to the root and typing DSSS build. You might be surprised how often that actually works. And then if you install it that way, that'll actually be library files that it can actually use in a sensible way. But like I said, copying it to the import path, that's the trivially simple way to make it work. You can tell it to. You can type DSSS genconfig, and that'll generate a configuration file. Yeah?
Just out of curiosity, how much power does it have in order to build the command line environment, I guess? Is it powerful enough that it can do some of these manipulations to jump back and forth between Tango and Progress?
I've been really reluctant to add that kind of thing, and part of it is that they're about 700 different ways of installing Tango. Hi guys. And so that what I've considered doing is just saying, if you want to be able to switch back and forth, then you have to install Tango through DSSS, which should be a reasonable thing for me to say. But I've been sort of reluctant on doing that because it's fairly complicated and seems like a configuration nightmare. But it is. I have a ticket open on it, and it is something that's being considered and is in the pipeline. Yeah. DSSS build --debug. It'll build both a debug version and a non-debug version. When it builds the library, it'll set it up so that if you build a debug binary, it will link against the debug version of the library. If you build a release binary, it will link against the release version of the library. Yeah. Yes. So I guess I didn't really cover that well, but. No, I didn't forget. I wasn't sure what the entire scope of the question was. But as for API documentation, I think I covered that. That's done. The other documentation, it can be handled as sort of an extra step. It can be downloaded. Every DSSS environment has curl in it. I've guaranteed that just due to how the net thing works. And so you can add an extra step to guarantee that everybody has the same documentation available and such. As for actually hosting it, well, that's perhaps more complicated. You need it.
One of the big things that this might not cover is the wiki pages.
Right.
There's going to be a wiki dump out of track.
Right. But as for actually getting those to people, that can be done as a. Yeah. Obviously, DSSS being a build system is more about the API documentation, that sort of things that are actually involved in the process of building.
Well, we could file a ticket then, too.
You could file it. No, that one I might reject. But I'm not sure who was first. But, okay, so he was first. Okay. He says you were first. Somebody asked you. Well, let me go back a few slides. Oh wait, that's not in a slide because I didn't have that with me. But basically, there's an administration interface. It's on the web. This this is the new one that will eventually exist. But you basically publish the information on whatever release of your build in a source list. And then it gathers all the information about what modules it provides and such. You don't need to list any of that, and publishes it. So releasing it isn't a command line process, or isn't something that, isn't a command line process. It's a networked process. You put your source together, and then on this web interface say this is where it's available. Okay, so do you mean like if the actual building process fails, or the installation?
For example, really common that you try to copy something over a file and you suddenly don't have rights to it. For example, it's still in use, or still running a debug test, something like that.
Right. Okay. So I mean, if the DSSS build fails, it just aborts. Obviously, it keeps everything that it's doing in its own separate directories, so it doesn't leave any files strewn about. There's a DSSS imports directory and a DSSS objects directory. So, oh yes, and then you can do DSSS clean, DSSS dist clean if you're paranoid about things being left around. That's. Thank you for that comment. Yeah, you can always get rid of that. And in the process of installing, if it fails, the manifest file is still created. So you will get a partial install, which perhaps I should bail out by uninstalling. I don't really know, but the installation process can't really fail that effectively. I mean, if you don't have permissions at all, then it will just not install. But if you, right, if you're, right. Oh, okay. So, right, you're saying if you install a new version on top of an old version. Ah, got it. Well, I think that pretty much the best solution to that in the current state would be to stop whatever you're doing and install it again, because the installation process is deterministic. It's not going to do anything strange. It's pretty rare to have complicated hooks in the installation phase. That's not really that useful, and so it's not particularly likely that the installation, unless you have a hook to something that fails, the installation phase is only going to fail partially if everything fails, so to speak. So, I mean, if it does fail, then pretty much just stopping it and installing it again right now would be the best solution. Better solutions always accepted. Any other questions? Yeah?
This goes to your principle about guaranteed build consistency.
Yeah.
I think it's a good principle to have. Our question is that what does DSSS do to handle evolution of libraries? So we're dealing with different versions of library. As the library evolves, they start losing their value.
Right.
How do you handle that?
Well, that's very complicated in any language, and it's as a problem. I think even in terms of just computer science in general, it's not entirely solved. But like I said, you can install to any prefix, and so if you know that it's broken for a particular version, you can install an old version somewhere else and prefer to use that. That being said, the versioning support in DSSS is a bit young, and I'm going to add far better versioning support, and I'd like to be able to, say, install Tango 0.99 here and Tango 1.01 here, and then your tool, if you know that it will only work with an older version, say, my dependency is Tango 0.99. Unfortunately, that pretty much can't be encoded just into the imports, which is one of my ideals. But I am sort of ramping up that good versioning support. It hasn't been very important recently or yet, because almost every DSSS tool is just the latest SVN, and so there really are no versions at all, and it would be almost impossible to handle that. But that's sort of one of the things that is to put it simply, I have a ticket on it. It is up in here somewhere. Oh, well, right. Well, if you'll notice this right here, you can have multiple sort of conflicting packages, which are different versions, and so if you linked to the different branches, and once the version support is a bit more solid, then said, I need this branch of that rather than the default one, or I need, the old stable rather than the new stable, then that would be a way of handling that as well.
Actually, this almost goes to the language. Has there been any discussion in the past of having versioning associated with import? Assuming there's some universal version of states out there.
It's
worked out real well in the Ruby community and some of the other scripting languages. Really kind of assume there's two universal libraries and versions of the libraries, and it's writing the language. It's worked out pretty well.
right, yeah, and that would be nice for me, because then it would all sort of fit into my my ultimate goal of having everything encoded into imports. That would be helpful, but there's a conversation to be had later. Right. 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 Yeah. Like I said, I didn't initially create very much. I created sort of stubs for versioning support, so not much will break when versioning support is added. But I didn't really add it heavily because it wasn't particularly useful at the time, and I mean, D is still a fairly young language, so the value of that is sort of degraded by the fact that things are just churning so fast that it's all going to crash and burn eventually. That is, any old version of a library isn't going to work eventually. Well, my point is that if you have an old version of a library, then you might also need an old version of the compiler, and you might also need an old version of something else, and so it's right now it's at the point where it's almost too complicated to even be worth it, and it's the language is so young that maybe you should just update your code.
Today, most active projects are all depending on other, or the latest assessment active projects are depending on the latest assessment of other projects.
Yeah, yeah,
Keep in touch. So.
yeah, right. But yeah, when things calm down in D, that'll definitely change, and I do intend for DSSS to anticipate that change and be ready for it. Anything else? No? Okay.